Hello again everyone from Tokyo, Japan, and welcome back to Japan Vintage Camera. Today I'm going to be doing something which I haven't done in a while, and that's going to be another how-to video. And this is one which some of you might find interesting and useful, and it is basically how to go over and clean up an Olympus Trip 35 camera. Now, there were lots and lots and lots of these cameras made. This is one of the most popular cameras which Olympus produced, and they were all basically the same design. There weren't really any changes in the variants of the camera until they eventually came up with a flash model. Most of them look like this here, though most of them come in silver. This is one of the black paint ones, which is a little bit hard to find. What I'm going to be doing to this camera is doing some work and which will address the basic problems these cameras usually have. One problem which they have is that the light meter step mechanism which operates the shutter and aperture can become sticky. The red flag, which is supposed to pop up when there isn't enough light for the camera to work, that sometimes sticks, and I'll be addressing that in this camera. And another issue which these cameras have is sometimes they have fungus or haze inside the lens elements, and I'll show you how to disassemble the lens and clean those parts. It's not a very difficult camera to repair, and you only need a few tools. You need a slotted screwdriver with a very small tip. This is a 1.1 millimeter tool. You need a small Phillips head screwdriver, and one thing which is very important is some solvent or lighter fluid like what I have here, and also a little bit of oil. And I use, some people ask me what kind of oil I use. And what I use for the smaller mechanisms in the camera is this oil here. It's a Japanese oil, round number 40, and this works quite well. It's also good for unsticking fasteners and stuff. If you attach it to, put a little bit on screws or whatever and let it sit overnight, often it'll unstick them and let them turn freely. Another thing I need is some lens cleaner and some cotton swabs. So, we'll go ahead and get started in just a moment. Alright, so let's go ahead and begin with the first step. In the first step here, what I'm going to do is I'm going to remove the top cover, and I'm going to clean out the viewfinder mechanism, and also clean up the light meter step mechanism. The light meter is located here on the front of the camera, and it's a selenium meter which detects how much light comes through, and it generates an electrical current which goes through a potentiometer or something like that on the inside. The needle moves back and forth, and depending on the location of the needle, it catches the two linkages which operate the shutter and aperture. So it's kind of it's not a very complex mechanism, but it sometimes sticks due to just age. So the first thing I need to do is remove the film rewind knob, and I usually use an old lens filter as a tray for putting the hardware so I don't misplace it or lose it or have it roll away. I work on a piece of material like this, so it's not slippery and stuff doesn't bounce if it falls off the camera, and I tend to work more in the middle of the table than on the edge of the table, because when you work close to the side, it's very likely something is going to fall off and get on the floor. And with cameras, a lot of the parts are pretty small. There are only 3 screws that hold the top cover on. There are 2 under the rewind knob. And speaking of dropping it, it went inside the rewind knob shaft. Okay. And then there's another one over on this side. The 3 screws are out, and the top can come off like so. There's a really long wire here which goes to the flash shoe. And the light meter works in this camera. I don't know if you can see it, but right here is the needle, and as I move my hand over it, I can see the needle moving back and forth, but the lens linkage seems to be a little bit dirty. So what I'll do to free it up, and I can see it moving now, is apply a few drops of cleaner. When I'm pushing the front here, these are the 2 linkages. They move up and down, And over here is the red flag, which if I have the cover on, it will come up all the way into the viewfinder and it won't take a photo. And it's coming up a little bit now. It wasn't doing that before, mainly as I've been working the camera here, it's been loosening up a little bit on its own. But I'll go ahead and apply just a couple of drops. And I'll put one more on the slider for the red flag. Okay, and the red flag is coming up, and you can see that the mechanism is coming up all the way. And as I move the camera around, I can see the aperture. If I point the lens directly at the overhead light, the aperture is stopping down a little bit, and if I move it a little bit out of the light, the aperture opens up a little bit more, so that means that it's working a little better. And the red flag is more or less working. I'll go ahead and put a bit of the oil here. What I like about this oil is it's very, very fine, and it doesn't gum up stuff, and it doesn't cause issues later on with the oil solidifying and causing the mechanisms to stick again. And put a touch more right there. And there. There's kind of a brass plate here, which the mechanism rubs against, and it kind of sets a little bit of tension to it. And there's kind of an adjuster screw. I don't recommend taking that off because it's a very precise adjustment. And one more spot right there. Okay. That's working more consistently. Alright. And it tends to get better over time. A camera which is used regularly always works better than a camera which is just used once in a while. Need to do to clean up the viewfinder is lift up this paper tab here and pull it forward. Another issue which these cameras have, and which can cause the finder to, or the meter to stick, is if it gets loose. And you can see this one's wiggling around a little bit. So address that by just tightening the mounting screw. And it's just a single screw on the inside, so okay. Alright, and what I want to do next is just quickly clean the inside elements, and take a cotton swab and a pair of small pliers, and what I can do is I can flatten the tips of the cotton swab. And flattening the tips allows you to get into the corners, which you wouldn't be able to reach if the cotton swab weren't flattened. Now, some cameras you have to be careful doing this. They have a mask on the inside, which is often painted on one side and glass on the other side. And the painted side, sometimes the paint can rub off if you're not careful, and you can rub off the lines, the bright lines, or the mask for the viewfinder frame lines. that isn't an issue in this camera, so you don't have to worry about it. If you're working on a old pin camera, it's a big issue in that. So yeah, don't be careful around the frame line mask lens if you're working on the old pin. I'll make sure that I do this and don't leave any dust or residue on the glass. One thing I didn't mention as a tool is a little bit of compressed air to blow out the dust. And I'll put a little lubricant right here. A lot of the parts on the inside of this camera are made of plastic and don't require any extra lubricant. I'll go ahead and replace the dust cover here. Use a little bit of glue. What I use is Bondo G17. This is a very common Japan industrial standard here. This is what pretty much all the camera repair people use in Japan for, I guess, tasks like this. The glue is tricky when it's fresh. It stretches out very easily, and it gets, makes kind of like spider webs which get on everything. And then when it gets older, it gets a little bit thicker and a little bit easier to use. Okay, leave the wire there. All right, and I'll clean the front of it and the back of it. Yeah, don't overdo the glue on the top. It's always possible, and I've found out the hard way that sometimes you forget something in your repair and you have to go back, and if you glue stuff on too tightly, it makes it more of an ordeal to try to fix it. There's a little bit of a small washer here that fits around there. And putting it back together, let's see, yeah, the button is still here. So some people say that that an original black camera Olympus pin should have the original black button. There is nothing really special about the parts on the original black camera. They sometimes have the chrome button as well as the black button, and there aren't any particular serial number ranges. I don't know how they just picked cameras at random and turned them into black paint cameras. The black paint ones are quite a bit more rare than the silver ones. Maybe for every 300 or 400 silver ones, they made one black one. What I need to do now is route the wire out of the way on the top and put in the shutter button with the flat part facing toward the back, and then slowly lower this on in a way that the wires aren't in the way or pinched, which is having a lot of wire is a good thing and a bad thing. A good thing when you take the top off and you're trying to reach the parts, and a bad thing when you're trying to put the top back on and get everything lined up. Okay. Alright, so that's back on. I'll go ahead and replace the screws. Magnetic tip on the screwdriver helps. The screws on this camera are made of steel, so it works well. Also useful on the old cameras which had brass screws. Go ahead and replace top here. Okay. there. Okay. Alright, seems to be working better. Okay, the next step, I'm going to take apart the lens and clean out the lens elements. So, pause for a moment and I'll come back and handle that. Alright, so let's go ahead and get to the third part. And what we want to do here is we're going to focus the camera to infinity, and as you focus to infinity you'll see that the front lens element will move downward slightly. What we're going to be doing here is removing the front lens element and lifting the front off of the camera so we can get to the inside lens elements. About half the time there's some kind of haze or fungus or something on the inside, and fortunately it's not so hard to get out. But one thing you have to keep in mind here is that there's a check ball on the inside, and if you aren't careful removing this, the check ball can get lost or misplaced, and putting it back inside is not at all an easy thing to do. So for this job we need the small Phillips screwdriver here, and we're going to remove some set screws around the lens nameplate here. And you don't want to remove the screws all the way, you just want to back them out so you can remove the nameplate. You don't want to remove them because they're very small and easy to lose, and even if you don't lose them, putting them back in is kind of difficult because of their size. So when they're backed out, you can simply lift the lens plate like so. There's a tab here, and this tab engages in the bottom of the mechanism where the focusing ring attaches. So as you turn the focusing ring, this ring here will turn the lens. So before I do anything else, I want to mark the position of the lens because it has to go back in the way it came out. I'm going to make two marks. The first, what I do is I make a mark on the exact top here. And you might not be able to see it there, but I can see it clearly here where the screwdriver is pointed. And I'll turn the lens clockwise until it bottoms out. And then I'll put a mark in the same place on the exact top. Okay, and then I'll simply remove the lens. Of course, I put it in a little bit tight there, more tightly than I should. Okay, luckily I have one of these rubber lens tools handy. And this needs to be oiled a little bit, it's a little bit stiff. And the lens comes out, and I can see a little bit of dust inside, but no haze. Next thing we need to do is remove the front lens element, and you'll need the Phillips screwdriver. There are a set of screws here which hold in the light meter. The magnetic tip comes in really handy here for this job. And these are the screws. There are two sets of 3 screws. We're taking out the upper ones which are holding in the plastic which hold this. And it just lifts out like so. And then underneath that we have 3 more screws which hold in the focusing ring assembly. There it is. Right under the wire. Okay, and this, as I said, this will lift out, but be careful to hold the bottom ring in so the check ball doesn't come out. Alright, and here we see the lens assembly, and what we need to do now is remove the front half. There are 3 more screws. Okay, and one of the reasons that these lenses get fungus on the inside sometimes is that there's a gap which allows the shutter and aperture mechanism. These are the aperture blades right here. And because there's an opening, it allows the atmosphere to get inside. So what we want to do is pick that up and lift it over, and pick that up and lift it over like so. And that exposes the inside, and luckily this lens is pretty clean. It doesn't really need much. There's just a faint touch of haze on the inside of it. So, and the aperture is behind, or not the aperture, the shutter blades are behind the lens and not enclosed, so it makes it a little bit hard to clean the back of the lens, but it makes disassembling the lens for repair a little more easy. Okay. And luckily I've got a view out the window here. I can use that while I'm cleaning to make sure that I'm not missing anything. And I'll clean this now. Alright. And then replace these where they're supposed to go. There's an upper one and a lower one. Make sure your hands are clean so you don't get fingerprints on the aperture blades, or you'll have to clean them off with solvent. The oil will make them stick a little bit or not move as freely as they should. Normally the front of the camera is not so easily removed. There's a clip here which holds the wires on the inside and keeps them short, but the clip, apparently this camera was put together without the clip. That makes this one a little bit easier than yours might be. You might have a little bit of a difficult time pulling it out, but you can pull it out enough to get to this point. As I was looking through it, I saw just a small bit of some kind of something on the inside lens element, and we'll clean that off now. The way I'm holding the camera right now, I can see the reflection of my ceiling lamp behind me reflecting off the glass, and that lets me see how clean I'm getting it. Looks pretty good. Alright, and then I have the lens itself. I'll worry about that once I get the camera back together. So what I want to do now is put this back inside in the position. With the wires in the right place. Okay, and luckily you can see the holes line up for the blades here. This wire is sticking out farther than I want it to. I've got to put it a little bit more inside. And so it's a good thing and a bad thing. Now it's for finding that the longer wire is making things more difficult. And I'm pulling it out, okay. Alright, and it should be right about there. Of course, when things run too smoothly, it means something's not right. just to check. Well, nope, it's in the right spot. Yeah, normally it's a little bit easier to do than this, of course. When I decide to make a video demonstrating how to do this, I'll get a little bit of grief. That's just the way it works, I guess. But anyway, it's going in now. And it should be pretty snug, not overly tight. Okay, make sure that those holes are going to line up. Okay. Looks like when whoever worked on this camera before, when they put it in, they didn't have the wire routed around the right side. It's in the correct position now. Okay. Blow out dust. And I'll go ahead and focus the camera back to infinity. Important point. You don't want to move the focusing ring and set the lens at infinity, but the ring not be in the right position. Okay. Alright, and I want to put a little oil here. This is a much heavier oil which I use for the focusing helicoids. I prefer to use the oil version and not the grease version. It's easier to apply and it works better. Okay. Now the tricky part is starting this lens in, which is a little bit difficult, and then once you get it started in, you have to make sure that it's indexed on the right slot. It's going in, but it's not in the right position because my marks aren't lining up, so I've got to take it out. Turn it a little bit and start it in a different position. Yeah, this can be like the most tedious part of the repair. Just getting the lens on. It sounds like a very simple thing to do, but it's not. It has to be held perfectly horizontally, and there are, I think, 4 possible ways to put it in, and only one of those ways will work. Okay, that's the right way. So as I turn the lens until it's seated all the way in my second mark, the second mark I put at the beginning is vertical. I go ahead and turn it just a little bit, so my first mark is vertical, and that means that the lens is in the right position. The next thing I have to do is, of course, put this back in, and it has to line up with the notch on the inside. I think I pointed that out earlier. And the notch is in this position, somewhere around, I guess, the 4 o'clock position. And the Japan part facing pretty much near the top. Okay, so now that's set in correctly, and I just have to tighten in the screws. Okay, and okay, lens is moving in and out. Everything is put together fine. Let me check this out. Okay, the red flag is working, the light meter is working, the lens is clean on the inside and outside, and the focusing helicoid has been relubricated. So pretty much the two major important things which have to be done to these cameras is taken care of. The light meter and red flag system is working okay, the viewfinder is clean, now the lens is clean. The last thing I would do on this camera is replace the light seals, and on this camera they're especially easy to do. There's just a seal on the hinge and there's a couple of small pieces here. The rest of it's boxed around in the film door, so it doesn't require the work. So that's pretty much it. This camera's about ready to go. So anyway, that's it for my video here on I guess bringing back to life an old Olympus Trip 35 camera. This one is now in good working shape. I'll be listing a few more of these trips for sale over the coming weeks as I can get a hold of them. They're really wonderful little cameras. They're compact. They have a great lens, very simple operating system. They're pretty much foolproof. All you really have to do is focus, and they have this wonderful little scale focus system here. Portraits, a couple people standing up, you know, full height, and then infinity. A very easy to use and understand camera. That's why Olympus made them for so long. But anyway, that's it for this video. I plan to make a few more of these videos in the future. If there's a camera or something you would like to know how to fix or need advice on, you know, feel free to leave a comment in the comment section below. Thank you very much for watching, and I hope you tune in again soon.